Hello, it's Dr. Cindy with this week's Mental Health Moment. Last week, I discussed the ways in which attitudes, beliefs, and emotional reactions and patterns that we've held onto from the past can make us feel stuck and unable to move forward in terms of experiences we want for ourselves in our life now. Some of these are coping strategies that we developed in response to our home environment, and while they served us early on as children, they no longer fit for us as adults. Today, I'm going to talk about some of the typical patterns that develop in childhood and how they carry forward into adulthood. Much of the research in this area comes out of work with families in which there's an alcoholic parent and the roles that children in that type of environment often take on. I'm going to use this idea of roles as a framework for discussing how the coping strategies we adopt as children can influence how we relate to others as adults. But I want to emphasize that these are trends and patterns that occur on a continuum and may even shift and change over time within individuals. I like to think of these as outfits that children try on to see how well they fit for what they are experiencing. If the outfit seems to protect them physically and emotionally, brings positive attention, or relieves tension and strife in the household, that is likely to become their preferred means of managing their experiences. They may still try out other ways of responding, but if a particular strategy seems to fit their need to feel safe and/or their desire for recognition and attention, that will likely become an ingrained way of reacting and interacting in the environment. Every single one of us, regardless of the specifics of our upbringing, made connections and drew conclusions from our early experiences that then created a template for our understanding of ourselves and those around us. This is not specific to people who experience some type of extreme disruption or trauma. And typical factors such as the birth of a sibling and one's position in the birth order of the children in a family contribute to this process. I've talked about this extensively in many other mental health moments, and you may recall one example I gave of how a child might view their parents' interactions with a new baby as a reflection of their own value or worthiness as they experience the loss of the undivided attention they used to receive and observe the special treatment that the infant seems to get. This is a natural process that takes place for every single child as they try to learn the rules of engagement and figure out what things elicit positive and negative responses from the adults in their life. Since children rely on their parents for their physical, social, and emotional needs, they naturally want to try to act in ways that will ensure that those needs will be met. A great example of this is provided by Mary Laura Philpott in her book, I Miss You When I Blink, as she describes the conclusions she came to as a child about how to secure love in her household. Quote, "We weren't a family who held hands during the blessing or told each other we loved each other out loud. But the look on my mother's face when I showed her an A plus said, 'I love you.' Good grades gave me the evidence that, at least until the next test, I was secure in my place as a preferred person in my house and in my school and probably, why not, in the world. Naturally, it stood to reason that the opposite was true as well. If an A means you are loved and you belong here, then anything less than an A must mean you are not and you don't." End quote. Note that this is a conclusion that she came up with as she was trying to figure out how to secure love and attention as a child. She developed this understanding of what she thought made sense based on her interpretations of her mother's expectations of her and reactions to her, and what behaviors seemed to earn positive regard, not realizing that this was a faulty conclusion because her mother loved her no matter what. Many children growing up take on an achievement orientation as a means of trying to make sure they are loved. While all children want to be successful and feel a sense of accomplishment, it can be detrimental if this becomes how they define their self-worth. Firstborn children can be particularly susceptible to this as they focus on trying to please their parents, and they may throw themselves into schoolwork, sports, and other such activities as a means of doing so. At an extreme, this achievement orientation can develop into extreme perfectionism, with the young person always wanting to be the best and needing to always be right. The achiever can become excessively driven and afraid of failure, which can mean that none of their successes or accomplishments feel good enough to them. They fear making mistakes and are extremely self-critical. This causes high levels of stress, particularly as they drive themselves harder when their accomplishments don't make them feel as good as they had hoped. When they do not meet their own or others' expectations for success, they experience intense guilt and shame and can end up feeling unworthy, inadequate, and fearful. They often feel like an imposter as their internal sense of themselves doesn't match up to the praise and recognition that other people give to them. This predisposes them to anxiety and depression and can lead to an emotional crisis, particularly if they fail at something that was significant to them. Adults who have adopted this achievement orientation may struggle to believe that significant others in their lives love and care about them for who they are rather than for what they accomplish. They may continually seek out new opportunities for success and advancement, yet find themselves still feeling unhappy and unfulfilled. And their whole sense of self-worth can be in jeopardy if they experience, for example, feedback at work that they perceive as being negative, if they aren't evaluated as highly on a performance review as they think they should be, if they are passed up for a promotion, or if they lose a job. Deep down, they fear that without external successes, they are worthless. In some homes, a child may take on a caretaker role, particularly if there's a situation that compromises one or both parents' ability to manage the household sufficiently. This may be the case if one or both parents suffer from addiction or mental health issues, but also if there is a special needs child in the home or in larger families with many children. The assistant works to keep the family together, which might include watching over and providing for younger siblings, trying to maintain the home, and being as helpful to the parents as they possibly can. As a result, they can grow up feeling as if they never really got to have a childhood, which may lead to bitterness and resentment. They may also struggle with fear and inadequacy due to feeling responsible for keeping everything in order, which is next to impossible, and blaming themselves when things don't go smoothly. This might also be directly or indirectly reinforced by a parent when, for example, the parent is scolding or disapproving if the younger sibling gets into mischief when the assistant is supposed to be watching them. If there is a high level of conflict and stress in the home, assistants will work very hard to establish or keep the peace. They may shush their little brother if he's being loud at the dinner table, rush to soothe the crying baby, or step in to help a family member who is getting stressed or frustrated. They assume a great deal of responsibility and blame for their home life, and they may be controlling toward others as a way of managing their anxiety and trying to keep everything in order. Having taken on so much responsibility for everyone and everything, they operate under an incredible level of fear and often make decisions based on that fear rather than what is really best for them. As adults, they can have a great deal of difficulty asking for help since helping has always been their role as well as their source of self-esteem. They are the fixers in their relationships with others, looking for ways to make things better if anyone they care about is upset or experiencing some type of trouble. While being helpful and unassuming in their friendships and other relationships, they often end up feeling slighted and hurt that people don't reciprocate with equal care and concern about them. Their relationships with others become one-sided, leaving them feeling unloved and unsupported. And being so focused on other people's needs makes it increasingly difficult for them to recognize and prioritize their own. They become whoever they feel they need to be to make their relationships work, often losing themselves in the process. Another common pattern for children to develop, particularly in chaotic or high conflict homes, is to try to stay under the radar and not draw attention to themselves. The absent child tries very hard not to rock the boat. They tend to be quiet and keep to themselves, which helps them feel safe, but it also means their needs for connection and attention do not get met. They often feel discounted and of little value because the downside of just wanting to be left alone is being left alone. So they feel ignored by others in the household and may develop and escape into a rich fantasy life in which they are safe and loved. The absent child will likely resent the family for neglecting them and can grow up feeling rejected, lonely, and inadequate. They carry deep shame that something must be wrong with them since no one seemed to care about them, causing them to feel undeserving and unlovable. They both crave attention and are terrified of it, as attention in their home was often not a positive experience. When they do get recognition, it may come in the form of praise for being so easy and never giving the parents any trouble, which reinforces their belief that it is best for them to be neither seen nor heard. At a less extreme level, children might absent themselves from their family by focusing more on relationships outside of their household as a way to meet their needs for connection and attention. This is commonly observed from middle children who tend to struggle with not feeling they have a distinct status in the family and often feel left out. As a result, their peer group becomes a primary source of affiliation, and they may have weaker connections to their family than their friends as adults. In adulthood, the person who hid within their family may feel uncomfortable when attention is focused on them and will likely not seek out others for comfort or support because they are accustomed to managing their feelings on their own. It might be difficult for them to open up to others and let them into their inner circle, having spent so much of their lives within their individual bubble. Unfortunately, this perpetuates feeling unworthy and unlovable. Some children establish a role as the comic relief in the family, providing a distraction from whatever tension is occurring. The amuser may crack jokes, make funny faces or voices, or act in other silly and goofy ways to relieve the stress in the household. The youngest child in the family may be most prone to this behavior as there are fewer maturity demands on them already, and they can't compete with the responsible, helpful actions or achievements and accomplishments of their older siblings. Their sense of humor distracts and deflects from their pain, fear, and emotional discomfort, which means those feelings never get processed or resolved. They rely on this coping strategy to get people to laugh, which gives them momentarily positive recognition and a temporary sense of self-worth. But because this is fleeting, the amuser may experience a great deal of anxiety, inadequacy, and insecurity. And sometimes their efforts at humor will be met with anger from parents or annoyance and irritation from siblings. They may be scolded and shamed for not taking things seriously. Because their joking demeanor becomes their habitual way of relating, they often don't feel able to truly connect with others on a deeper level. And they may have trouble forming more than superficial relationships as adults. Having always used humor to cover painful feelings, they will struggle to be open and share their emotions. They likely find it difficult to trust that people can truly be there for them even when they're not being the life of the party. Their humor may give them attention and a sense of self-worth, but they do not really feel truly seen or accepted for who they are. So the achiever, the assistant, the amuser, and the absent child all adopt those behaviors as ways to earn love, create safety, and make things more peaceful at home. Some children cope with their family dynamics in ways that seem to add to rather than diminish the stress. They don't behave in ways that smooth things over, but instead end up stirring the pot. The agitator is the one who is the most expressive of the struggles that everyone else is trying to cover up, compensate for, or avoid. The agitator may actually be the most emotionally healthy one in the family, as they are expressive of their emotions and more likely to articulate their distress when things don't feel good at home. They may be labeled as the sensitive one because they cry when their feelings are hurt or because they show their fear or anger. They may be seen as a problem child if they act out their anger by getting into trouble at school or having outbursts at home. They might be scapegoated because they don't follow the unspoken family rules and may automatically get blamed for difficulties that arise. As a result, it can be difficult for the agitator to trust their own feelings as everyone else is acting like everything is okay while they are experiencing great emotional turmoil inside. They might grow up believing that something is wrong with them, which can cause a great deal of inadequacy and unworthiness. Others might recognize that their family's characterization of them was unfair, and this makes them unduly angry or resentful if they feel questioned in their adult relationships, or if their feelings are challenged or invalidated in any way. So what do we do with this? First, it is important to recognize that all of those behaviors are a reflection of underlying emotions, and the actions and behaviors we took on as children were our best efforts at managing what we experienced in our families. So have compassion for the child who went through those experiences and appreciation for what they did to get you through them. Secondly, now that we are adults and no longer living in that home and within that family, we get to shed the layers that we built up to protect ourselves and no longer have to be limited by the roles that we played. Remember that just because our early experiences predispose us in terms of how we react to and interact with people and situations in our lives, we don't have to keep responding in our patterned, programmed ways. And when we cast off what has confined us, we discover who we were always meant to be, people who are worthy and deserving of caring and love and recognition and support, not because of what we do or how we act, but just by virtue of being who we are. We grew up feeling like we had to be a certain way in order to get that. As adults, we get to decide who and how we will be now. As a starting point, I suggest spending some time this week thinking about situations that you have been in recently and reflect on your internal reactions and external responses. Notice any patterns in your behavior and consider how these might reflect the coping styles that I've just presented. If you participated in a meeting for work, did you find yourself keeping quiet and letting others do all the talking? If so, you may have adopted a style of hiding in interpersonal situations. Conversely, did you make a point of giving your input as much as possible? That may indicate an achievement focus and a desire to get attention and recognition for your knowledge and expertise. Maybe you led the chit chat at the beginning of the meeting and joked around with your colleagues. That could suggest an orientation toward wanting to facilitate an amicable environment and keep things peaceful. How did you respond if things became tense or more conflictual? How did you feel about attention that was directed to you? Did you welcome it or dread it? What was your experience of others' interactions with you? Take notice of anything that made you feel uncomfortable, insecure, inadequate. What were those situations and how did you react internally and respond externally to them? Also reflect on your recent interactions with friends and family members. What roles do you tend to adopt in those relationships? Are you the one that everyone comes to for guidance and support? Are you quick to intervene or take over when a loved one is struggling? Do you immediately offer some type of help when a friend is in need? How do you feel when you hear about someone else's successes or accomplishments? What types of conversations or situations cause you to feel badly about yourself? What happens for you if someone doesn't recognize something that you've done? How do you react when a significant other is upset with you? As much as possible, try to observe and record these various situations without judging yourself. There's nothing wrong with you or how you react and respond to experiences in your daily life. But as with anything else, if something causes you pain or discomfort, then it is important to pay attention to it and try to figure out how to make it better. All of the patterns and tendencies I've been talking about are normal human responses and coping strategies, and these all have value. There's a verse in the Bible that says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. How you got through your childhood served you and made you who you are today. Now you get to decide who and how you want to be moving forward. And next week, we'll talk in more detail about ways to make that happen. Take care and have a good week.